The concept of the Nintendo Switch 2 edition is one of the worst things Nintendo's ever done, and I think it's only going to get worse. So of course, with the launch of the Switch 2, we got Switch 2 editions of a few games: Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Mario Party Jamboree, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. And I don't think people had an issue with the idea of it, but the concept that they can just add a little more content, make the performance slightly better, and then charge even more from launch is just ridiculous to me. So you've already seen a ton of people talk about that, and I'm not saying anything new there, but I think it's only going to get worse. When these games were announced at launch, maybe it could have just been seen as trying to fill out the launch lineup, trying to get a few games for the early months. Now we're getting the Mario Wonder Bell Park for an extra $20. We just got Animal Crossing New Horizons Switch 2 edition, and to be fair, that's only $5. And there's a lot of rumors that we're going to get more, that we're going to get a Mario Odyssey Switch 2 edition, a Pikmin 4 Switch 2 edition. And if these were just $5 or $10 upgrades for an extra mode, no one would care that much. Like, people might be annoyed. But the issue is that if you're trying to buy this retail, you're paying $70 or $80. Like, just tell me what universe Mario Party Jamboree is worth $80 because of this. And Breath of the Wild, so even last year when it was 8 years old, $70 when it launched at $60, all for the Zelda Notes update. And I guess there were a couple other things, like there was more in Tears of the Kingdom, but $80 for that? The game launched at $70 a few years ago. And I think the issue is just how Nintendo sees it. It's not the issue of them, like I said, making this content, but they're basically saying this game is worth $60. When it launched, it was worth $60. It's worth $60 now, but now we're adding in $20 DLC. There's no deal here. It's not like you're paying $60 for the Switch 2 edition and they lowered the price of the Switch 1 edition. They're basically saying it's a whole new game and you're getting DLC with it, so that's why it costs so much, which I think is pure greed. I've tried to be fair to Nintendo, but I just don't see how I could justify this in any way. I think the worst offender is Breath of the Wild. So again, this game came out in 2017, so 8 years before the Switch 2. So they're charging $70 for this for the minor upgrades. And not only that, but they're not including the DLC, so you're basically spending $90+ on an 8-year-old game. At least if it came with the DLC, I can understand it because there's never been a complete edition of Breath of the Wild, but that's something separate. And it's just a big flaw, or I guess not a flaw for Nintendo if they're making money, but it's just a big issue for how Nintendo values these games. And it just leads to very anti-consumer decisions, because we already know Nintendo doesn't like to lower their prices because they feel that if it launches at $60, it's a $60 game. Occasionally they'll have a sale, but it's not very often, and it's usually not that big of a sale. If you look at pretty much any other developer, most $60 or $70 games go down to $20 or $30 within a couple of years. Even some really great games, like the entire Resident Evil series, pretty much, you could buy some of those games for under $10. Like, not old games, or not super old games, like Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 7. I'm seeing those go for $10 to $15, and they're fantastic games that came out in the past decade. But anyway, not focusing on other companies, Nintendo not too long ago had the Nintendo Selects version of games, so they would sell $20 versions of games. I don't think it was on the Wii, it was on the Wii, the 3DS, and it was just a good way to get a quality game for a cheaper price. And I feel like if Nintendo did something like that, where they made Nintendo Selects versions of the Switch 1 games and charged a little more for the Switch 2 version, like let's say Breath of the Wild, they lowered the price to $40 and then charged $60 for this. People would still be unhappy about it because you're paying the same price you did at launch, but I don't think there would be the same resentment that there is towards it. And the fact that Nintendo has announced multiple games since just shows that they're trying to make as much money as they can off these old games, like trying to get people to buy these expansions or the full games. The issue isn't that it's an extra $10 if you already have the game, it's an issue that it's a $70 or $80 game. And I don't think we've seen Nintendo do anything like this, like in terms of just pure greed like this, just pure unnecessary pricing decisions. We've seen things in the past, like Nintendo overcharging for certain consoles, Nintendo overcharging certain games, but I don't think there's been something like this exactly. Even Mario Kart World, like, yes, it's overpriced. There's no universe where that's worth $80. I don't even think it's worth $60 because I just don't think it's that great of a game. But that's a brand new game, at least. That's a brand new Switch 2 game. I think this is just worse. And it seems like it's kind of taking away from potential new games in these series. Because we got this new Animal Crossing, the Animal Crossing Switch 2 edition this year, I don't think we're going to get an Animal Crossing game for a while. This is a game that came out 6 years ago now, and now we're probably going to have to wait a couple more years because they wanted to make the Switch 2 edition, and they're not going to want to have them compete against each other. Super Mario Party Jamboree only came out a couple years ago, so maybe that's the Mario Party for the next few years. Mario Wonder, who knows, maybe we'd have a new 2D Mario soon, but nope, we're just getting an expansion to Mario Wonder, and I'm sure that's not it. Whenever the next Nintendo Direct is, which I've talked about in other videos with how it seems they're just not announcing new games, but whenever they do have a new Direct, I can almost guarantee they're going to have some type of Switch 2 edition. Nintendo in recent years has just been taking every opportunity to sell old games. Remember in the Switch one, every Wii U game pretty much got ported. There was only a few that didn't, and that was understandable. I wasn't a fan of charging full price for that, but I understood it because these were basically new games for people. No one had a Wii U. I didn't buy many of these because I pretty much have like all the Wii U games I wanted. Like I have Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, Pikmin 3, New Super Mario Bros. U, like games I didn't need to get on the Switch. They added some content, but that was it. But at least they were the same price. And also a big one is that you couldn't play those games on the Switch. It's not like you could play Wii U games on the Switch. You can play Switch games on the Switch too, which just makes these completely unnecessary in my opinion. If I may be wrong here, but if someone can find me an example of Nintendo overcharging existing games like this to this extent, like let me know in the comments. Like the one off the top of my head I can think of is like Super Mario Bros. All-Star Collection on the Wii, which I think was $50, and that was literally just a port of the SNES version, but that also is meant to be a collector's edition. Normalizing $80 games is bad enough, but normalizing $80 games that were $60 just because you added in a little content. Like when we used to see $80 games, it was games that just came out that had DLC attached, and you could argue all you want about that. Like I don't like that either, but those were new games and that was in addition to it. These are not new games, and I know I've repeated that a few times, but it's just indefensible in my opinion. And I think this comes from Nintendo being in a place of power right now. If you go back to the Wii U and 3DS era, Nintendo wasn't the power player they are today. Like their consoles were struggling, their games weren't selling as well. So they had these deals. Pricing felt a lot fairer. But when the Switch came out and it was automatically successful, that's when these decisions started to creep up, as there was controversy with some of the pricing decisions. And now with the Switch 2 coming off what will probably be the best-selling console of all time when it's all said and done, they're just taking advantage of the consumer with this. And at the beginning of the video, I said I think this is going to get worse, and I think it's one of the worst things Nintendo's ever done. And I've had to reiterate it a couple times, but the fact that it seems like this is here to stay, that Nintendo's just going to keep doing this, and it doesn't seem like things are slowing down, it's a dangerous precedent, because Nintendo has backed off some pricing decisions, like Amiibo that were supposed to be $40 now seem to be $35, so it seems like consumers fighting back a little bit against this is working, but I don't know with the Switch 2 editions. We haven't seen any price drops. Ironically, the only price drop I've really seen was Metroid Prime 4, which that's understandable why it's more expensive. It's a Switch 2 game. Like, it's not like it's a 5-year-old game that they're charging an extra $20 for updated graphics and performance. And I'm not talking about the game itself. Like, you can think whatever you want about Metroid Prime 4. I'm just talking about that concept. But like, at what point are we just going to keep getting more and more of these and less new games? Because I actually talked about this on my other channel about Nintendo's remake culture, where they've just been remaking and remastering a lot more games. And I think there's more nuance to it to say than this is just bad, because I do like when some games are brought back and reimagined. I have an issue with the price sometimes. And in that video, my biggest point wasn't that Nintendo's remaking too many games or Nintendo's remaking too many games that aren't justified. It was that when value doesn't line up with what you're getting, that's where I have an issue. It's simple as that. And if Nintendo is going to say these games are worth $80, how long until they start charging $90 for games? Because they've already set the precedent that Super Mario Party Jamboree, a 2-year-old game with an additional mode, is $80. So who knows, maybe they announce the next Mario Party, like the next regular Mario Party game, as $80 as well with no additional content. And then from there, why not make the next one $90? It seems like they're just slowly creeping up prices with this. Like they're kind of testing the waters, like if people will buy this. Because these games probably did not take them that long. The editions probably didn't take them that long to make, so if they flop from these prices, whatever. But something like Bonanza or brand new games, if they were charging $80 for that, Nintendo probably knows that would hurt sales. Like you can't charge $80 for Metroid Prime 4 because it's just not a big enough series we could get away with that price. Mario Kart World is. That's one of Nintendo's most popular series. Enough people want it, enough people will fork over that money. So it scares me for when the next 3D Mario comes out. How much are they going to charge for it? Are they going to charge $80, $90 because they're seeing that people are buying $80 versions of old games? So what can they get away with for a new game? I think that's the most dangerous precedent here, because all companies are greedy. It's not exclusive to Nintendo, and it's disingenuous to act like Nintendo's the greediest company of all time. But in terms of gaming, they're definitely showing more greed than they have in the past, where they felt a lot more reasonable. And there's going to be comments talking about other issues with Nintendo, people blindly hating on Nintendo, and I don't hate Nintendo. I still think they make a lot of quality games. Most of my favorite games of all time are from Nintendo, and I think the Switch 2 is a great system. In fact, I think the Switch 2 is fairly priced. I think $450 for that is not a bad price. I think $70 for certain games is a fair price with how the market is set right. Like $70 is the standard for most AAA games, and games like Donkey Kong Bonanza I felt were worth $70. But going back to the central point of this video, that Nintendo's just going to keep making Switch 2 editions, overcharging them, and then using those as replacements for brand new games. Because at least with a remake or a remaster, it usually gives access to a game that you just could not play on the Switch, or it reimagines something like Super Mario RPG. Like, was it a brand new game? Obviously not, but it feels like one. Like, it's an old game that got a lot of improvements and basically basically felt like a new game. These are not that. These are not games that you can now play on the Switch 2 for the first time. These are not games that really needed upgrades. They ran just fine. I mean, obviously Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have their issues, but why is it that some games have gotten free updates? Like, I think Mario Odyssey and ARMS like got slight upgrades like in terms of performance, and those were completely free. So yeah, they're adding new modes, but why not discount the original game if you're gonna make this new edition? And there's a simple answer to that. We know the answer. It's greed. Like, at least include the DLC. That's I think the most insulting part about Breath of the Wild, for example. Other companies will have like their gold editions or deluxe editions at launch, like I mentioned. But again, that's a new game at least. Like, at least you're not keeping the price the same after 8 years and then charging more for it. And actually, very often, deluxe editions like that come out a couple years after, or Game of the Year editions, whatever, they'll be significantly cheaper. Now, is that always the case? No. But it's very common for a game with DLC a couple years later to just be a cheaper price, because the value is lowered over time. Like, the most people who wanted that game already bought it, so they're making it accessible to more people. So let's say Resident Evil 7, for example. When it launched, I believe there was a gold edition. I don't know if that came out at launch, but it was a $60 game. You could buy DLC with it. Whatever it was, a year or two later, Game of the Year edition, whatever it was. Gold edition for PS5, I believe. I think it cost $40 when it launched, and you could probably buy it for even cheaper. I think it's like $20 now. That's a great game that came out 8 years ago, or 9 years ago now, that got an upgraded edition with all the content, and it's simply just cheaper. And I think there was already a free upgrade if you had the original on PS4 or Xbox One. So it honestly makes me pretty sad just to remember when we had Nintendo Selects games, when it's just so obvious like how much more goodwill Nintendo would have if they brought that back. And then this also ties into something completely different from Switch 2 editions, but Mario Galaxy the Collection was $70 and is still listed as $70 because it's only been out for a couple months. And literally all it is slight remasters of Wii games that were $20 each. Barely any new content. I mean, the graphics look a little better. So Nintendo is now setting the precedent that they can charge whatever they want, and I think the $60 Nintendo game is coming to an end. I think Tomodachi Life might be Nintendo's last first-party game that is launched at $70 or is launched at $60, or at least I should say there's not too many left, because if Nintendo's charging $70 for a Mario Galaxy remaster, can you imagine what they're going to charge for the next 3D Mario? Like I said, like I already brought up this point with Switch 2 editions, but now we can even look at the remaster example. Like, why would they not charge $9 for it? People will buy it, and Nintendo can maximize the money on that. I think it's just very concerning, and I just think there's justification for the pricing. I think there's justification for these existing if they were fairly priced, but Nintendo obviously feels they can make money from this, so it's up to the consumers to say, no, we're not going to buy this. And if consumers don't buy this, then Nintendo will be forced to lower prices. And then if they still aren't buying it, Nintendo will be forced to just make new games instead of just releasing more Switch 2 editions. But I doubt that happens, and all we can do is talk about it. All we can do is just encourage people to not buy these, because you shouldn't be buying old games directly from Nintendo anyway, unless you get a good deal. There's just zero reason to go to a retailer and pay full price for a game that you could buy for half off on eBay. Because for as many issues as some people have with eBay, I've never had an issue with a video game. If you buy from a reputable seller, you'll be able to find deals much better than what you can find in the store. So anyway, that's my rant here. I know there's going to be people who are blindly defending Nintendo and attacking me, calling me a hater, saying I'm capitalizing on the Nintendo hate. There's going to be people who say I'm being too nice to Nintendo because I didn't condemn them as the worst company of all time. There's no nuance when people make these criticisms most of the time. So it is what it is, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are you concerned about this? What do you think about Switch 2 editions? Be sure to subscribe.